Welcome to the Real Estate Forum, a podcast from the Paul Milstein Center for Real Estate at Columbia Business School. I'm your host, Raphael Sidelsky. This is your place for key insights into the evolving real estate landscape, from candid conversations with real estate thought leaders, including the esteemed faculty of the MBA Real Estate program, to cutting-edge research from the Milstein Center's Research Lab. Let's dive in. Today, my guest is Brian Steinwurtzel, a fellow Columbia alum and one of the leading office-to-residential developers in Manhattan. Brian has been successfully implementing the perfect antidote to the urban doom loop that we discussed on the last podcast with Professor Stan van Nieuwburg. Brian is a third-generation member of the storied Gural family and is co-CEO and principal of GFP, where he oversees all aspects of the company's new investments. GFP own approximately 13 million square feet of office in New York and are the largest landlord to small and medium-sized businesses. Noteworthy recent projects include the repositioning of 4 New York Plaza to 25 Water Street, the largest residential conversion in the U.S., 222 Broadway, 7 Hanover Square to 100 Pearl, and 40 Exchange Place in the Financial District. Brian serves on the boards of REBNY, the Downtown Alliance, and Self-Help Community Services. He has an MBA from Columbia Business School and a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration from Washington University in St. Louis. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
To get started, I'd love to discuss your origin story and how you landed up in real estate. You didn't grow up in New York. And out of college, you started on another career path, which is surprising given your family history.
I grew up in Washington, D.C. I was a child of the 80s and early 90s. And in the late 80s and early 90s, real estate was not a great place to be. Most urban cities were, tough places to live. As a kid, actually in D.C., I got mugged a bunch. So being in real estate wasn't a top priority. And most of the family meetings that I recall as a kid were arguments about all the things that were going wrong in the portfolio, and which was not uncommon for anyone who owned real estate in that period of time. And I always loved technology. And that was something that was really, coming to fruition at that time. And so when I got to college, I decided to study engineering and business. And was very, very into computer science and coding. And my first job out of college was at PricewaterhouseCoopers in their technology consulting division. And it was interesting. I did 2 projects with them. I learned a ton about technology in large corporations. But at the end of the day, I realized that wasn't what I really loved. I ended up getting 3 different job offers after PricewaterhouseCoopers. One was working for Prudential in the Midwest. One was a startup in New York City, and one was actually working for Enron. And I declined the Enron job only because I didn't know anybody in Houston, Texas. If I had known one person in Houston, Texas, I might have taken the job. My career would have certainly gone in a different trajectory. But I ended up taking the startup job in New York. It was a fintech startup. It was a great place to work. I really loved every minute of it. And unfortunately, after 9/11, Goldman Sachs owned most of the company, and they decided to pull funding for almost every company. And so I decided to apply for business school. And after I got into Columbia, I had a gap of time to work, and my uncle was nice enough to give me a job asset managing one of our buildings in Times Square, and I sort of fell in love with the business. And so when I got to business school, it was pretty obvious that I would study real estate, and Columbia was just a really life-changing experience for me. All the people I met were tremendous. I feel like my class and the people that were around me were some of the brightest people I've ever met, and yeah, the rest is history.
Did you pick Columbia because it was in New York City and because of its sort of vaunted real estate program? What were the other reasons, if any?
Wow, we're going back in time here. I applied to 6 schools. Columbia and NYU were 2 of the 6. I did want to. I had a desire to stay in New York City, and Columbia is a prestigious school. I mean, it met I think every, every category that I was looking for. When I applied to school, it was hard to tell, I think, whether I do finance or real estate. I think real estate I was just starting to, fall in love with at that point. So, Columbia gave me the opportunity to do both. But by the time I started at school, it was obvious that that's what I wanted to do.
And any highlights from, the curriculum and the coursework? Was it a great place to be a sort of career switcher and really immerse yourself in finance and real estate?
Yeah, it was. And so real estate was it was phenomenal education experience. It was really broad. I mean, we were doing things that like we were studying like REITs and how to structure them, a significant amount of the debt products that now all of a sudden 20 years later that we're actually utilizing, which my family did not utilize at the time. And not only that, but because of the core curriculum and also the opportunity as a real estate concentrator to take other classes, I was exposed to just a wide variety of opportunities. And interestingly enough, it's not what I thought of when I applied to Columbia, but the leadership coursework actually has benefited me significantly. I learned a lot about myself and a lot of where my weaknesses were. And then I realized where I needed to actually spend time. So I thought I would spend most of my time doing finance or real estate. And I actually ended up spending a lot of time on learning about myself and, how to actually work with others and how to work in a large organization. So and most people think of an MBA. I think most people think of an MBA as just learning how to do finance or marketing or management, but there's a lot more to it. And Columbia certainly showed that to me.
That's great. And what about the network and, all the people from industry come speak on campus? You obviously grew up in the business, but I presume this gave you exposure to a whole different, cast of characters.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the doors that it opens are pretty incredible. I remember sitting in class and just being in awe of the guest lecturers that would come in. And it actually took me a little bit of time to get up enough courage to actually start, talking to them or finding them after class. And those opportunities just to meet people that you never would be able to meet were tremendous. And a lot of them led later on to different opportunities where there would be potential deals or even ventures or things where we were working on something that I needed to get some outside like help, and we're able to reach out to some people and say, hey, I met you. You taught this guest lecture class. This is what we're doing. Do you have a few minutes to talk to me? And inevitably, almost every single person would respond very quickly and say sure, and they would provide time and advice. And I don't think you get that unless you're at a place like Columbia. And Columbia, because we're in New York, each class basically it's so easy for someone just to jump on a subway or take an Uber up and lecture. And fortunately, I've had the opportunity both in the business school and the law school to actually go up and do guest lectures and teach cases for the school, and it's been a tremendously rewarding experience. And then I do tell people that probably the most valuable thing you get from the school is the network. I tell anyone who asks me advice for as a business school student, I tell them that there are 700 people around you that are going to have incredible careers and go to the top of all their fields, and they should spend as much time as possible meeting with them and getting to know them, becoming friends with them, because you never know where you'll see them again. And in my career and my personal life, I've had that happen over and over and over again. The class that I was part of happened to be just tremendously successful, and out of the 30 odd people that were concentrators in my real estate concentration, the majority of them have gone on to like just illustrative careers that make headlines on a daily basis. It's pretty incredible to see.
That's great. And you've also been giving back a lot to the school with the lectures and your involvement. So I know everyone appreciates that. So jumping on to your career, so you use Columbia Business School as your bridge to get from the consulting technology side into the real estate side. Tell us more about how you then integrated into the family business. As someone who's worked for two family businesses or family offices, I've seen a lot of different dynamics play out. So tell us a little bit about your career arc within GFP.
I am fortunate. I was fortunate that my uncle and my cousin allowed me to dive in and take a lot of leadership roles within the firm. When I joined the family business, there was really two businesses. We were under the Newmark umbrella. We owned what is now basically Newmark, the publicly traded company, and we owned our real estate portfolio, but we branded both as Newmark. And I started doing primarily asset management, but a lot of what I was also concentrating on was understanding how our business operated and then where it was going. Newmark was in the process of expanding significantly to become what is now a global company, and our real estate portfolio was growing and becoming best in class for small and medium sized businesses. And so I was afforded the opportunity to actually work with Barry Gostin, who's the current CEO of Newmark, and work on basically like a white paper almost of what Newmark could be. And then simultaneously was working to structure within the family business how to move away from Newmark to be its own company and establish best practices for running a portfolio. And those two experiences simultaneously, helped me sort of like propel my career and eventually become the co-CEO of our family real estate portfolio.
That's great. And tell us a little bit about the office portfolio. You are the largest landlord to small and medium-sized businesses, dealt with a lot of challenges during the pandemic. Where's the business now? How has that informed what you do and what you have been doing on the development side?
My grandfather and my uncle, along with our partners, acquired this portfolio over 60 or 70 years, and basically had a lot of bolt-on transactions, mostly acquiring manufacturing buildings and then converting them into office buildings. So the concept of converting a building is something that we've been doing for a very long time. They did it in a manner which had a lot of equity and not a lot of debt. So even, let's say, before the pandemic, our LTV was less than 30%. And they always had in mind of creating the highest quality buildings in our peer set. So for them, if you were a tenant and you toured our building and our competitors' buildings, you would walk away that our buildings were being run as well, if not better, than our competitors. And we always have reinvested in the building. So always making sure that our elevator systems were modern, our lobbies were attractive, that all of our common areas were modern. And that reinvestment was something that's unique to us. Like, even if the building is full with a long-term weighted average lease, if the building still needed to be upgraded, we would put the money into it so that in each cycle, no matter what, we weren't caught off guard, and we always had a best-in-class asset. So going into the pandemic, we were 99+% leased. Our LTV was, like I said, less than 30%. And our renewal rates with our tenants was greater than 90%. So we were doing something right for sure. The pandemic was a very challenging time. Clearly, our leased percentage went down into the low 80%. There's a lot of companies that just failed. There were a lot of companies that decided that it was better not to spend money on rent and to work from home. But what's happened over the last 3 years plus is that companies have realized that it's better to be in the office, that they're more efficient together, that even if they're only going to be in the office 3 days a week, it's still better than no days a week. And so our lease percentage has been going up, and now we're back into the mid to high 90% range. We still have challenged areas, but we are working hard to lease those spaces, and we will not lose a building in this cycle. And in fact, we are still cash flow positive, which is an achievement, just given how difficult the last 5 years have been.
Yeah, that's an incredible accomplishment. So kudos on that. And let's start talking about how you had this history of doing residential conversions within the family, but you're now on the vanguard of this new wave. Tell us about how that came about in general.
Sure. So I'd say roughly 15 years ago, the family decided that they wanted to continue to acquire new assets and to grow. And they allowed me, along with the company, to invest in people and bringing people on board that were talented, that could identify assets to acquire, and then that could do significant renovations or construction or new build out of the groundwork. And so by building that team, we were able to embark on expanding the portfolio. And we did all sorts of projects. Over the last decade, we bought a lot of office buildings and then just renovated them and upgraded them and kept them as office buildings. But we've also done student housing, we've done education facilities, we built a life science building, and of course we're doing a lot of residential buildings now as well. So during the pandemic, immediately we recognized that there was going to be a significant amount of distress, and we turned the team that I run, focus on buying distressed office. So immediately we went about identifying very large office buildings that would likely not survive the cycle. And in that effort, we were able to identify, 4 New York Plaza, which we now call 25 Water, and we actually rebranded as Soma, and 222 Broadway, and then several other projects that are not announced yet. And those buildings, we worked with their existing lenders or their equity to work out, the ability to acquire those buildings at are really significant discounts to what they had previously traded for. And, I feel very fortunate that we were correct in that. It was a big leap of faith to do this in 2021 and 2022. But that effort has worked out. And anyone who goes to at least to see Soma right now would see that it's really just a beautiful building. And it's something that clearly a lot of people want to live in.
Absolutely. Touring it with you was pretty amazing. And it's funny because when I was at Columbia Business School, I actually lived in what is now called Fidei, which didn't even have a name back there, at 25 Broad Street, which was the former Payne Weber headquarters and had been converted to residential years before. So the submarket has changed dramatically. The building's phenomenal. You have 1,300 apartment units. You have 100,000 square feet of amenity space. And, the leasing volume is pretty phenomenal. But let's go back to what you started with, which was this hideous IBM punch card building, as you call it. How did you go from that to where you are now?
Yeah, it's a very unique looking building. It was a unique looking building.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah. So the first step for me is identifying a team that's capable of doing this work. And, we try to hire the best and brightest, and we've been fortunate to be able to do that. And so we immediately, our development team immediately worked with Metro Loft, with Nathan Berman, who I've known for years, and brought him in as a partner. And we brought in Setro Ruddy, who's an architecture firm who has done, I think, more conversions than any other architecture firm, probably in the country. And we embarked on a plan to try to convert this building into what you see today. And it was very challenging because we had to remove most of the facade of the building. We had to carve out 2 light wells into the building, and then we took that floor area and we stacked it on top to build an additional 10 stories. So it was a feat of engineering in many, many different regards to do that. And the way that the New York City code was prior to City of Yes, this was a pre-City of Yes building, made it actually even more difficult to create the legal light and air and density that is required to make this kind of a project successful. But, fortunately, that team was able to design this building. It's more than 85% efficient, which is incredibly difficult to do. And we were fortunate that the building had a lot of space that was below grade. And then with the additional 10 floors we were able to build, we were able to create, like you said, approximately 100,000 square feet of amenities. And, it's hard to put into words what 100,000 square feet of amenities looks and feels like, but it has almost anything you could ever want in a building. And it almost feels more like something you would find in like a suburban campus than you would in an urban environment. But we basically put in anything that anyone suggested that seemed to make reasonable sense, we put into this building. And that team was able to design it in a way that still makes it feel like a home, makes it feel like a community. And if you do visit, you'll see that a lot of these amenities are surrounded upon the lobby entrance and this central area, and it sort of creates this opportunity for a lot of people to see each other and meet, and to have these like random interactions, which again makes it feel very much like a community.
Absolutely. So just give us a sense of the scale, because you described the dimensions to me, but those two light wells, you had a good analogy, or compared it to give people a sense of the scale of just the light wells that you carved into the building.
We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to explain it to people, because you could put it on a piece of paper and you could try to use words to describe it, but we always got these confused looks from people when we were trying to describe it. So the best description I can give is, it's like if you went to the Upper East Side and you found like one of the widest townhouses, if not the widest townhouse on the Upper East Side, and you picked it up and you brought it down to 25 water and you turned it on its back, you could drop that entire townhouse, let's say a 4-story townhouse, on its back, and it would fit in the light well, and you'd have room all around it. And the second light well, that's even larger, you would even have more room on top too. So it's really quite large, and it feels more like a European courtyard, if you will, than it does like a light well. So it's, I mean, not surprisingly, but I think it's what's surprising is how quickly and for how much demand there has been for those light well units. So it's clearly been a success, but quite difficult to explain in words, but it's good, worth the visit.
That's a great visual, the townhouse. So tell us a little bit about the mix. You've got affordable units. The city absolutely needs affordable units. You're one of the developers who's actually providing affordable units, but tell us about the mix and how you think about affordability in New York City.
It's very difficult to build affordable housing in New York City. The cost to build affordable housing is the same, if not more, than the cost to build market housing. And a lot of that is because the regulatory environment that you have to go through in order to not only build the apartment, but then to go lease it is much more difficult than doing just straight market units. And in New York State, I forget the exact number, but the last time I checked, it cost over $800,000 per unit of affordable housing, and that number is just growing. And then you're only able to charge a very limited amount, because clearly you want the apartment to be affordable. And so the economics for doing that are not viable. And so it requires either, it's a significant subsidy or some tax abatement or some other combination of factors to make it economically viable to build. And we feel proud that we were part of the team that worked with the city and state to negotiate 467M and come up with a program that actually makes a lot of sense. You have to realize, or at least from my perspective, these programs are, it's binary. Like, they either make sense and everyone opts into them, or they don't make sense and nobody opts into them. And it seems that the 467M is one that makes sense, and that most people that are converting buildings today are looking to opt into that program. And as a result, each of the buildings that will be built under the program will have 25% of the units as affordable. And the affordability is not only like a very affordable, let's say a 40% AMI unit, but there's also a significant amount of what they call 90% AMI units, which are really people that are like it's like people who are actually working in New York City and now can afford to live in New York City. So this is really truly workforce housing, which is just fantastic. And then the way the program works is that the affordable units have to match the market rate units, and the market rate units in this building are, probably roughly half studios, and then another 20 or 30% like 1-bedroom equivalents, and the final 20% or so as larger 2-bedroom equivalents or larger. And that's a mix that we feel is very, very appropriate for the city. There's a dominant factor of younger people that want to live in New York City, and they are flocking to buildings that have these smaller studios or 1-bedroom apartments.
That's great. Well, good to see a program that works, that provides this, 40-year tax abatement and allows for people to convert office to residential and include, significant affordable housing. Can you give us just a sense of the magnitude of the deal in terms of total capitalization, and then talk a little bit about where you are in leasing velocity and rents?
Like total capitalization, I'll say it this way: with an asset where you're doing as much work as we're doing to it, where you're removing most of the facade, you're carving light walls, and you're building on top, like the total capitalization will for construction will be much larger than, let's just say, a building like 222 Broadway, where we're doing like more of like what they call like a vanilla renovation, where there's no facade, very little facade work. There's no light wells. There's very little footage being added on top of the building. But you're looking at a capital, like the building when we're completed will be worth approximately $1 billion or more, and the number of units is, like I said, roughly 1,320. You can do some quick math and see that it's we're profitable because of our ability to complete the building quickly. So it's roughly 25 months from the time we started to the time we finished, and the fact that we're able to acquire it for so little. If the acquisition cost is too high, or we're not able to complete quickly, then these projects very quickly become uneconomic, and you can easily lose money. And I'll just add one more point on that one. So the most expensive thing that we have when we're doing these projects is time. So the cost of our equity, the cost of our debt is quite significant. It outweighs, a lot of the costs of doing the actual construction work. So completing quickly is probably the most important factor, along with just having the building be very efficient. So once you do complete it and you lease it, it becomes economically viable.
Right. And I think you guys have one of the, have the rare accomplishment of completing the project on time and on budget.
That's right. Yeah, we're ahead of, but we were to get to first TCO, we were ahead of schedule, and hopefully we'll complete leasing ahead of schedule as well. We're well on our way, and there's been just tremendous leasing velocity. In June and July, I think we were signing approximately 100 leases per month, which is really a significant amount of leases if you're in the residential real estate business. And that momentum has continued into the early parts of August. So it's very exciting to see what's happening, and it seems pretty clear that we've created a product that people like, which is very rewarding.
Brian, you've talked about your projects. What do you think about the other people who are engaged in the office to residential conversion and the sector overall? How much of that will we see in the next few years, and how much of the office stock will be converted to residential?
The city's last estimate is there would be somewhere between 20 and 30,000 units of housing created by conversions. And we are monitoring our peers that are doing a lot of projects that are very impressive. And I think they will be successful. The biggest measure of their success will be on how well they're purchasing the building, what their basis will be, and then capitalizing them, and then how quickly they complete. I think that if they can acquire these buildings an appropriate basis, then they will be successful. But no matter what happens, I think because of 467M and the creation of this 20 to 30,000 units, the city will be successful because it's putting a dent into the gap in housing supply. And most of these projects, if you walk into them, you would not be able to tell that they were office buildings originally. The level and quality of the improvements that are being made, not only in our portfolio, but in our peer set, is really just extraordinary. And these will be great places to live. And I think they'll perform just as well, if not better, than their pure residential peer set.
And is it fair to say that without 467M, that sort of number of conversions would be radically less? And that's a great example of industry and government working together to create, like you say, the actual solution that works.
I think that's correct. There certainly wouldn't be any affordable housing being created from these conversions. So the creation of the affordable housing is the number one byproduct that comes out of the 467M program. But there's only so little that a building will trade for. Like there's some point where the value falls where someone will acquire it and just keep it as office. And so the incentive to help finance the creation of housing is really important to creating this many units. I think it would be significantly less without this program. But the other thing to keep in mind, sort of on the flip side of it, is the way the program was crafted was they wanted it to be a shot in the arm to, give it a boost, give the industry a boost to start creating this housing. But the first phase of it really ends in June of 26, so less than a year from now. And if you're not in like full speed ahead plan mode, you probably won't make the deadline for that first 467M cutoff. And what happens is the economic benefit just drops, relatively significantly. And then there's another period where they're hoping to sort of continue some of these projects, and then it drops again, and then it comes to its completion, and there is no more 467M. So it's not an open-ended program. There's really a time limit to it. I don't know if they will extend it because it's been successful. And at the end of the day, a city really wants office buildings because office buildings pay a significant amount of taxes, and those taxes go to fund, all of the things that we need in a city. So converting the entire city to residential, not a good idea. And we will see what happens when this program comes to its completion.
Got it. And any thoughts on why 485X is not taken off?
485X there's 3 tiers to it. The first tier with 99 units or less, I think actually has taken off. If you spend time watching the headlines and projects being announced or projects being filed, there's just a ton of 99 units or less projects that are being filed. So I think it does actually work for that segment. But what happens is the wage requirements change significantly once you build a building that's over 100 units. And so it is very difficult, if not impossible, to make economic sense for these larger buildings. There's some element where if you have like very large buildings, if you have 1,000 unit plus buildings, then it sort of makes sense again. But between, let's say, 100 and 1,000 unit buildings, it's not crafted very well. And it does seem odd that you'd pay someone you have to pay workers one rate on a building that is less than 99 units, but then more on a building that's over 100 units. It just doesn't seem to make sense. So hopefully there's a revisiting of that program, and they analyze the data and they see that there really aren't a lot of buildings or of any buildings that are being built that are over 100 units.
That's great. So you're sort of accomplishing this need for the community, for the city, for renters. How did the capital markets embrace this? It was a unique project. How hard was it to finance it and to raise the third-party equity?
Well, we're fortunate. We had a tremendous partner in Rockwood Capital. They believed in the project from the beginning, and they were our equity partner. And they, I think together with them, we were able to capitalize the project. But we did it really at the end of 2022, which was a very difficult time in the market. If you recall, interest rates were basically skyrocketing, and I think the question for us wasn't that it was going to be capitalized because we have a very good reputation, we have a very good partner. It was just what the cost of the capital would be. And shockingly, I think if we had capitalized the project 3 months or 6 months earlier, we probably would have saved potentially $20 or $30 million in capitalization costs, right? It just shows you how quickly the markets can move against you, but it also shows, I guess, they can move with you as well. So, timing is everything, but we still pro forma'd a project that could survive these kinds of interest rate changes, if you will. Look, a lot of the projects that we do, I'll say it that way, is that we know we can capitalize them. It's just going to depend on what the cost of that capitalization will be.
And the key is obviously having the margin of safety where you can absorb those shocks.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on New York City emerging from this urban doom loop that the pandemic is sort of infused, and where you see the city right now, and what are the current opportunities? Are I know you're still active looking at these conversions, but tell us a little bit about how you see the current and future environment.
I mean, to me, there's always concern around potential new political cycle and a new potential new mayor. Right now, the city actually feels great, and I say that in the context of in 2020, I was in the city multiple times a week, and it was a ghost town. I have pictures that I took when I was in Times Square where I was the only person there or one of the only people there in the middle of the day. So to me, if New York City feels tremendous, it's extremely active. My train that I take in is full. My parking lot is full. The restaurants are full, and it feels extremely vibrant right now, and it feels safe to me. I feel very comfortable taking the subway, going to all the neighborhoods where we own assets, and walking around myself. And I'm comfortable with my daughter coming in. She's 17 and she comes into the city all the time. So it feels good. I think what we're concerned about is what happens in the future, right? We're always looking forward, and we have a potential mayoral candidate who does not have as much experience as prior mayors. So that's always a concern. There potentially would be a restaffing of the very important departments. And so we're obviously monitoring that and seeing what could potentially happen. The urban doom loop, which we are all concerned about, so far has been held at bay, but it's been a confluence of factors. Like, the federal government has really come to New York City's rescue and New York State's rescue during the pandemic, and they provided a significant amount of funding for us, for our society to continue the way it is. And so the services that we come to expect really haven't been cut or suffered in a way that seems to affect like the day to day, right? Our subways still run, our buses still run, the trash is still picked up, the streets are still paved. It's been something that we've avoided. What may happen now, and depending on what happens with politics and with people's decisions to live in New York City, is we probably will not have as much funding from the federal government, and then potentially, depending on how it feels to live here, people may decide not to live here. But today, I think we have more jobs in New York City than we've ever had. We have young people that want to live here more than they want to live anywhere else in the world. Our universities continue to have a significant amount of applications, and the city feels great. So hopefully, who's ever leading New York City and New York State will help to continue that feeling, and that people will continue to want to be here, because that, at the end of the day, that is really the key to our success and our survival.
Absolutely. Any other sort of projects you want to touch on or investment themes?
Right now, we're focused. We have 3,000 units in the pipeline. We're trying to do more of that. But I would say that the office is really it's come around. I think it's turned the corner. There's certainly on the AA office buildings and the A office buildings, there's more demand than there is supply, and that has caused pricing to rise significantly. It's something that we've all been watching for many years now. But what's happening is that demand is being pushed down into the let's say the A minus and B plus areas, and so there's opportunity for those that are buying correctly, some of these other assets. And so it's a theme that we're paying attention to. We're finding, we still find so much opportunity in the creation of residential housing here that we're not as focused on it, but it's I'd be remiss to say that we're not paying attention and watching. So that's a great theme to be spending time on. Student housing continues to be very expensive and difficult, so there's obviously room for growth in supply there. And then we'll see what happens with our educational institutions. For a very long time, they've been expanding, and that's a good thing, I think, for cities, for their institutions to be expanding. So we'll see if that stagnates or if it restarts.
You've also been involved and are involved in a lot of community and board engagement. How did that come about? And tell us about your efforts there.
Thanks for bringing that up. I think in our family, volunteering and giving back has been just a part of who we are since I was a kid. I mean, I don't know if it was something that was like a mandatory compulsory requirement, but even as a kid, we volunteered. I remember even as like a young kid, like we would go to like hospitals, and there were people that were there and sort of stuck there, and we would create these like mixtapes for them just so that would like sort of brighten their lives rather than just being stuck. But it's something that's continued throughout my career, and I feel fortunate to do it. It's probably one of the most rewarding things that I do in any given week. And I've been lucky enough that others have trusted me. And in my career, I've been offered the opportunity to sit on a lot of not-for-profit boards, probably at least a dozen and potentially 2 dozen in my career. And, I continue to do that today. It's just, I think it's the best way to give back, and also just to help, help our community and our city and our society. And, money is good, and we certainly do donate, as much as we can, but also just giving back and trying to help these organizations make the right strategic decisions and recruit the right employees, to give those employees the support they need in these organizations, and then to watch them flourish. So it's been probably like the favorite thing that I do, as part of my, I don't know if I'd say my job, but as part of my career.
Well, it's amazing you do all of that, and then the firm, your office portfolio serves a lot of those nonprofit tenants as well. What is their sort of financial situation at the moment? What does the nonprofit world look like financially?
It depends. Clearly, I've been involved in a lot of like legal not-for-profits, and actually they've done very well because people have recognized that there's a big gap in the services and that people who can't afford those kinds of services need. And so actually the federal government, the city, and the state have done a great job funding those organizations. But then there's others that are, struggling because they have missions which are important, but they're reliant upon just a handful of individuals to give. And if one of those individuals, passes away, or they move, or they just decide to move on with their giving to something else, then they can struggle. And so it's a mixed bag for sure. And the giving and philanthropy is very much tied into economic, success of the region. So, I think it's better than it was, let's say, a couple of years ago, but it's I don't think it really has recovered to what it was in 2019.
Got it. So, with the cutting edge deals you're doing, the large portfolio, your busy work schedule, you do have a wife and kids, you're a phenomenal golfer. How do you find time for all of this?
Well, I mean, look, number one, at work, I'm fortunate my uncle and we have a tremendous team that run our legacy portfolio. So there's actually very little that I have to do on that side of the business. I get to watch, and I'm impressed every day at that team and what they're doing, especially given the challenges of what's happened, during COVID and our recovery from it. On our development side, like I said, we invest in the best and brightest, and they are really great producers. And, I'm fortunate that most of my job is really just listening to them, and most of the time, working with them to actually give them the resources they need to produce. And then as far as, home life, let's face it, the technology that we have today gives us a lot of opportunity, and we can do Zoom calls from, almost anywhere. And, one of the interesting things about GFP culture is, people ask us like, well, how did you change your like work policies, work from home policies, et cetera, since the pandemic? And the truth is we really didn't change them that much, because we always encourage people to spend time with their families, to to take that call from, right before the soccer game starts, so they could actually watch the soccer game, but be there and be present in their kids' lives. And we always had very flexible working hours, and we try to listen to our employees and adjust them as things go on. But that home life, that that other side, that's really should be the focus of what we're doing, and we want people to be able to do that, and that includes me.
Got it. Well, on that note, before we wrap up, I'd love to ask if you have any recommendations for the audience that are not real estate related, whether that's a book, a philosophy, a work of art, a mode of exercise, any kind of life hack?
I think that getting to know yourself is actually the most important thing you can do, because there's a lot of things, at least that I do, that I look back and I'm like, well, why did I do that? I don't understand. It didn't quite make sense. And I felt very strongly about it. And actually at Columbia, there was a class that was there that was called Creativity and Personal Mastery. And there was a teacher, his name was Sri Kumar Rao, and he taught this class, and he was just a phenomenal influence because he taught me to question who I was and why I was doing what I was doing. And I would highly encourage everyone to think about that and think about themselves. And I think if you really explore that, although it may be very difficult, I think the things you learn about yourself will actually help you be happier. And then if you're happier, then people around you will be as well. So as much time as you can spend on learning who you are, I think you'll gain those rewards.
That's great advice. Well, Brian, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you as you continue to reinvigorate and reshape the urban fabric in New York City and beyond.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Forum, a podcast brought to you by the Paul Milstein Center for Real Estate at Columbia Business School. Be sure to subscribe for more insights from real estate thought leaders, industry professionals, faculty, and the latest research and expertise from the Milstein Center's Research Lab at Columbia Business School. If you've enjoyed the episode, please follow, rate, and share the podcast. You can keep up to date with the Paul Milstein Center for Real Estate at business.columbia.edu/real estate. Thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next time.